All right, we're back, episode 6 here, and we have a new face on the show here. We were joking around before of like how do you kick this off? We don't have a set intro here. We might have to figure that out at some point, but we like to keep it conversational. And yeah, we got a new guest joining the show, Ricardo, business partners with Steve here. Before we dive into like some of the updates and some of the topics we want to chat about, Ricardo, maybe just like give some context for anybody listening, your relationship with Steve and C42 and what you guys are kind of like doing and working on now.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here. Steve is my brother from another mother, work wife, partner, friend. We've worked together for um, I think we met back in 2008, 3 agencies ago. So yeah, we go way back. It's an awesome relationship that we have. We've actually co-founded a couple of different agencies together. Um, Collective 42 is our sort of the culmination of all the experience that we bring to the table over the last 15 or so years. So really pumped about this company and what we're doing here right now, and working with you, Trevor, and everybody else that we work with. So yeah, my role is more on the design and development side of the company. Steve is our analytics marketing guy, and we kind of have a yin yang. I tend to be a little bit more about the process, reporting, operations, while he's more about the production,
Yeah,
strategy. And together we kind of have a meeting of the minds where we ground each other out and we come up with some good plans together. So yeah, it works.
I think I think one of these episodes, like maybe not now, but we might have to tell the story about the whole like link building situation that you guys
Oh
spun up
man,
at one point. That would be a good one to tell.
yes, yeah, let's do that.
All right, cool. So, as we usually do, we usually go through a couple different topics here that we have like a little agenda to put together. I think starting out, one of the things that we spoke about last week on the show, um, and let me see if I could find the exact. Okay, so this was from 2 weeks ago. So essentially, we were speaking about TikTok and how a younger generation is using that platform over search. So 51% of Gen Z prefer TikTok over Google when doing an actual search online, which was really interesting. And Steve highlighted how like there were some Wikipedia articles that were being shared on the platform. Now, I'll share my screen because I think this would be a good visual to show. So TikTok was just starting off with some of the kind of like link sharing with Wikipedia, but now they're starting to show content where um, they link out to a Google search result page. Search Engine Land showed a couple of these of like what these initially look like. And you could see here up top, like we got a couple of these images, but the search Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, this links to Google. And I think the Google spokesperson, yeah, said that they had no like further, nothing further to share and declined comment on whether this was a financial agreement between the two companies as part of the partnership. There's got to be something there. I thought that was kind of funny that they like declined to comment on that. But this is really interesting to see TikTok now including some links from Google, and I'm assuming other sites there. But I don't know. I'm not really surprised to see that. Like if Google's seeing a lot of the younger generation is using TikTok for search, you got to figure out they're going to try and combat that or do something to make sure that that younger generation they don't lose out on all those search or all that traffic there. So I think this is an interesting space for us to keep an eye on here, especially on like the SEO like ranking side of things.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. On one hand, you have TikTok. They're trying to keep their users engaged within their ecosystem. Then you have Google. They're the giant. They've had the lion's share of the search industry for the better half of the last probably 2 decades or more.
Yeah,
So but they're feeling it. I think they're starting to feel. Well, they're not starting to feel that they know that it's happening. There's definitely a lot more competition now, and so it's really interesting to see how these companies are going to work together. I think one of the things that's interesting about this article that I picked up on is that this isn't an ad unit yet. TikTok, I think there's a comment in the article about TikTok confirming that. It could be more of a strategic partnership. There's another article that we're going to look at later on about a partnership between Google and Apple too. That's kind of um, unraveling a little bit right now. And so,
Yeah.
Google might be looking for more partners to get their search out there for. They still have that, I think. It's Google is still Google, right? Even though they're feeling threatened, and there are competitions, there are competitors out there. There's still the standard of search, I think. So, definitely one to keep an eye out on. They're not ads, so it's not an ad unit ad. These are organic results that they're embedding into TikTok search results.
Yeah. And two, to like that point on Apple, like, you know, Google has a partnership there with Apple. They're clearly testing something out here with TikTok side of things. It's interesting that like Apple or TikTok didn't try to build their own search engine.
Mm-hmm.
Like they partnered with Google. That's got to tell you something that is hard as possible to build a search engine. And why not just tap Google? Because they already do it. They've been doing it for decades. They have all this data, they have the infrastructure in place. So it kind of makes me feel like, in that sense, that like Google's definitely here to stay, but how it's going to evolve and how like organic results are going to evolve
Mm-hmm.
will be interesting to watch. But it seems like the infrastructure of search, Google's still going to be a dominant player for at least a foreseeable future.
100%. Yeah, I agree 100% with that. And if in this is a trial run right now, it's something that's being. I think they said that they're trying globally right now. So we can't also ignore the possibility that if this trial goes well, there will be monetization strategies there for both TikTok and Google down the line. There could be in the future an ad unit that you could run through Google on TikTok. Who knows, right? So it's early days for that test, but it's an interesting catch that that user had, and they posted a screenshot on Search Engine Land. So
I'm looking forward to seeing how this all plays out here. I think I don't know. I think it'll benefit all of us. It's just going to be like
uh-huh.
a transitionary, everybody kind of like figuring out their strategies. But I think this is only positive.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it is, and users are not so much tied down to one platform anymore, right? I think that you still have a base of people that use TikTok and they go back to Google for search. So at the end of the day, this is also about user experience. So giving TikTok users quick access to Google search results from the app, it just streamlines the whole process. It's just bringing both of those things together. So you can definitely look at it as a user, first, type of trial there.
Totally. And I
Yeah.
also think too, one of the things that we spoke about a lot on this podcast, just in general, is like dark social or like zero click ads and the importance of creating content, specifically video content and like getting clips online here. I mean, Steve and I have talked about literally starting the podcast so we can get like clips for social and that like
Yeah.
how important that is. Um, this also just kind of reminded me there of like if search is going to be more important on TikTok and there's going to be more mechanisms to rank organically, website wise, absolutely need to be buttoned up and you need to have like a strategy in place there. But you also got to be thinking about the content that you're going to be producing because if that younger generation is searching more frequently on TikTok, maybe they come across your content organically, and like that's how they get brand affinity with whatever brand you're affiliated with. So something to
Yeah.
consider for all brands moving forward is like video content. It just has to be a part of your mix at this point. It's almost impossible to ignore here.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, not to digress too much from this story, but something that I've read recently in regards to creating video content for TikTok is that a lot of companies they're a little bit gun shy about that because they want to put something out that's really well produced and it's it looks beautiful and it's scripted and it's got all the right trimmings that you're used to seeing in a TV commercial or something. But that's not really what resonates in TikTok. It's that user generated content shot from the iPhone. It doesn't have to be high quality. People want to see real human beings interacting. They want to see that user generated content. And so it's okay to get a little scrappy, even for big brands. I read recently an article on what's the app Duolingo. I think
Yeah.
that's, yeah,
Yep.
with the little owl. They have a whole strategy on that. It's really interesting. be a fun one to do a deep dive on one day. And it's all done in that format.
It's that brings up a really good point there too, of like larger brands being a little bit more scared to produce a lot of content. Like they have to have like one piece of content that's like really really well done and
Yeah,
produced commercially wise. I think those brands are going to lose there. Like they got to adapt and just be willing to test multiple types of content and produce a significantly more amount of content. I also think that goes to the agency side of things, because I'm sure you've worked with agencies in the past, and a lot of people could probably relate to this, of like agencies taking a long time production wise to produce certain assets. That's also going to have to change. And I'm assuming more agencies are going to be adopting AI tools to help speed up that production there, because the days of just creating like one commercial and like letting that run for a couple months and then you do your new campaign concept, that's impossible. Like you just gotta be able to like speed up that piece of production significantly more, and be testing on your TikToks, your LinkedIn's, your Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, Snapchat, whatever the case may be, to make sure that if these platforms are going to be, um, searched by a younger demographic, that your organic content has the ability to rank on those platforms.
yeah, 100%. Sorry about that.
No worries. All right,
Yeah,
let's get into
100%.
the I think this might be a good transition. I know we want to talk about this ChatGPT update that just happened, but before we get to that, maybe we speak to this potential lawsuit here
Mm,
on
yeah.
the Apple side of things. Um, so, and I know we were talking about this before. So, who is the guy? Jason Kent. He's like a what were you saying he was about?
Well, this article that we are reviewing, we picked it up on SEObook.com, and SEObook.com is a blog run by Aaron Wall, and he's an OG SEO guy. And I was just making a comment that I love that SEObook.com looks exactly what it looked like when I
That's
was
so
just starting my
sick.
career in SEO. And they had a little Firefox extension plugin that you ran ranking reports from. I mean, he's been around,
That's
and I just love
legendary.
that. I just love that the site looks exactly the same still. But
All
yeah,
right, shout
yeah,
out to
he's
Aaron Wall
still.
here.
Shout out to Aaron Wall. Never met you in person, Aaron, but yeah, uh, love the content, and he does some really in depth pieces here. This is a super interesting one if you want to get into the antitrust case that's actually going on right now with Google.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, and I love the aesthetic of the site here as well. It reminds me of Paul Graham's site there. I've recently like went down a rabbit hole and read a bunch of his blog posts, literally like very similar format of like
Yeah,
early days of the internet there.
yeah, it's
But
like the early SEO guys, you know, like yeah,
that's so cool.
yeah.
Uh, think about those days. It's probably like way easier to like rank for content or like
Oh
use a
man,
paid ad on Google search.
I think
Ah,
be
man,
that could actually be a whole episode that we spend talking about the different tactics that we used to do. I mean, early days, link building was it was just a wild west. You know, how many thousands of links do you want this month? You know, yeah,
that's cool. Well, essentially, what this antitrust case is, uh, from from what I understand, is Apple charges 30% within that ad auction, essentially, and I think that's like kind of a component to this, is whether or not they can continue to charge that. Um, I'd be curious, like, so what is like the main like overview of this suit here before we get into more like specific details.
I mean, it's a pretty big case, and there are a lot of different components to it. There is a big piece with Apple, and but you know the antitrust case has to do with Google's monopoly over the search market, and the U.S. government basically coming after them. You know, it's something that we're seeing now. Also, Amazon is going through a similar process now on the e-commerce side of things, and the full exhibit that they're going through in federal court, they're unsealing just a ton of different exhibits on this. So there's probably too much. I don't I couldn't even speak to everything that's happening, but I do know that there's some big things that could impact the brands that we use every day, the companies that we use every day, like Apple, for example, and our iPhones. So and one of them has to do with Google being the default search engine on your iPhone, right? So Google pays Apple a staggering amount of money to be that search engine. And part of this case that's happening now, that the antitrust case, is that those payments could be deemed to be illegal, which would force it would be a major hit for Apple to lose that contract with Google as their default search engine. And if that happened, you know, part of part of what the article is talking about here is that it could force Apple into creating its own search engine. Um, so yeah, there's a lot going on here with this one, and this is what I alluded to a little bit earlier, that there's an aspect of Google. Yes, there's still the search giant. They're not going anywhere. But I think that they're feeling threatened, and there are a lot of forces coming after them, including the US government right now.
That yeah. So I you did a much better job of framing that there. And as you were speaking there, like just kind of like thinking through if they're not the default anymore on those Apple devices, like that's wild. Like this one
Yeah,
statistic here, like when Apple Maps launched and Google
right.
Maps lost that default position on iOS, Google Maps lost 60% of their iOS distribution. And that was with how poorly the Apple Maps rollout went. So I kind of forgot about that, but I've heard not many people enjoyed the Apple Maps experience there and
Right.
they still lost 60%. So if you think that Chrome or like Google, like that search default engine isn't going to be the default on Apple devices moving forward, like what do people decide? Like what do people then decide to use there? Like is it going to be more Safari usage? Is it going to be more like what does that actually like look like? But I would assume this is a massive deal for Google here.
Yeah. I mean, there's a ton of competition in the search industry today. At first, I think if you look back at the early days of search, there was a lot of competition there, but nothing like today. We have some established search engines today. Of course, Google is the number one, but we have established players like Bing. But we've got some emerging ones as well. Brave Search, which comes in with the Brave browser, they've been really going up. There's one called
Yep.
Mojeek. There's lots of different ones. A lot of these are search engines that were started by folks who left Google. You have the DuckDuckGo. Uh, there,
That's a
there's
big one.
there's a lot of competition out there. Google still has the strongest market share. I agree with you with what we said earlier. They're not going anywhere. But yeah, I mean, there's a possibility here that if Google were to lose this lawsuit and these payments to Apple, which are in the tens of billions of dollars for them to have this privilege of being the default search engine on Apple devices, if they were to lose that lawsuit, these payments could be, like I was saying, deemed to be illegal, and that could force Apple to develop its own search engine, which, if it goes down that same path of Apple Maps, it could be a total flop. But if they learn from those mistakes and they actually are able to get into this world, uh, that could disrupt Google's dominance in the search market. Can you imagine an Apple search engine that that's the only one that you can use on your iPhone? And you know, I don't need to tell you how much search is happening on iPhones. Probably more than desktop these days. So I don't even know the actual percentage, but there's definitely a little bit of a shake up on that Apple Google relationship right now, and it's got a lot to do with the financial side.
I would love to know from like an Apple executive's perspective, like how they would want this to play out. Because to your point there, like that could be a massive opportunity to Apple if they were to build a search engine and execute on it and everything panned out properly. That could be a big opportunity for them. But I could also see at the same time, like they would have no interest in doing that Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's
Right.
search isn't their main business. Like products and innovation is their business. Search seems like a whole like massive investment of time, obviously not cheap to build that, and like a huge focus. So I almost feel like Apple's kind of like, this would be super annoying. We'd rather just keep things rolling as is, and we're going to execute on what we're good on, and we're going to let Google handle the search things. If I had to guess, I would think that Apple would probably not want this to pan out, where like they would be forced to figure something out for themselves there.
I would agree, and there would be a conflict too because Apple's brand, which I think many of us would argue is probably one of the strongest brands in the world. Uh, you know,
Yeah,
One of the things that they are associated with that they work very hard on is around their commitment to user privacy. Right, that's a key factor of Apple, and every privacy concern that's happening and is coming up from this antitrust lawsuit against Google, it's only strengthening Apple's brand position as this consumer privacy ally. But what happens when Apple has to go out and create their own search engine? They're going to find themselves in the same privacy hellhole that search engines find themselves in.
that's a
So
great point.
it's a good. I agree with you. I don't think that. I think they're scared. They don't want to get into the search game, but a lot of it is going to hinge on what happens with this lawsuit.
Dude, that's wild. Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
even think about that. Literally, like you have like your phone, so you know like all locations that you're going to at all times, and apps and all this other stuff, and then you add on top of that of like, hey, we know all of your search results, like all of your search results history, all of that. Like that's a whole nother component
Yeah,
to
and if they have their own search engine, there will be an ad component to that. There will be advertising. And
without
now, why
question.
wouldn't they
Yeah.
use all the other data that's already on the phone? So now they have a really closed environment that, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see.
I think it's safe to say that something's going to happen here with regulation on whether like this partnership's broken up or not. It seems like something's going to happen on the Google side of things. Like I saw we talked about last episode how there was an exec in Google who referenced how they would inflate cost per clicks by like 5% in order to meet certain spend targets and internal revenue goals. I saw an email on Twitter that released that leaked yesterday from somebody on the Google Ads team, basically saying, "Hey, we got to like figure out a way to like get some more clicks on these ads, and we'd even be willing to have some worse search results in order to like fund that." I mean, even like this little excerpt here for brand campaign focus on niche product. She said CPCs were 11.74. They surged to $25 over the last 6 months. So 108% increase with no increase in sales, and like nobody regulates that. Like that's like really interesting to think through, that Google can just have a monopoly on search and then also control what cost per clicks are and how they go up or down, and there's no regulation in that space. It seems like we're trending in like something's going to happen in that direction there.
Yeah, yeah. It feels like Google would be the too big to fail player in the
Yeah,
internet world for something like this to come in and break them apart. So I think there will be some kind of arrangement at the end. I don't think there will be you know, this is just one man's opinion, of course, but I can't see a world where this lawsuit ends and Google loses and that's it. They're getting broken up, and all of these worst case scenarios are going to happen. There's probably going to be some arrangements made because they're also very intertwined with the government itself.
that's a
So
fact.
yeah,
Well, we'll see. I think maybe like sticking on this theme here of some like shady like practices
yeah,
in the industry. I know we want to talk about some ChatGPT stuff and some of the recent updates, but I feel like maybe let's just chat about the this one analysis real quick before we get into ChatGPT that we wanted to chat through. So search engine land, we're shouting them out twice in this pod. Bunch of great content from search engine land there. They did an analysis here, and I think to give credit, it was from the Juniper research firm here. So they conducted this analysis, and you can see obviously from this headline, 84 billion of ad spend lost due to ad fraud in 2023. So essentially, Juniper Research, they've gone out. And I think they kind of break down like how they actually did this analysis. Um, so essentially, what they did was they analyzed digital advertising in 45 countries across 8 regions using a data set of all these different points. This one kind of didn't make sense to me. They used data points from 2019 through 2028. I don't know how they got future looking data points, but essentially the gist is they've reviewed data for the past, call it 5 or so years, on the ad side in all of these different countries. What they found is 22% of all online ad spend in 2023 was considered fraud. So that's $84 billion in ad spend. That's just fraud. Just nothing going to come of it. Complete wasted ad dollars. They then project by 2028, $172 billion is just going to be ad fraud, which is mind boggling to think about how much money that is. That is just complete ad fraud. And I'm always curious, like, what does that even mean? Like, what does ad fraud even mean? Essentially, it's like I don't know everything that goes into it. And Ricardo, I don't know if you have like any other insights there, but from my understanding, it's a lot of like these bot farms and a lot of like competitors doing nonsense to spend competitors' money, and these different bot farms that'll go out and just click on ads and no intent to like purchase a product or like actually conduct business, just clicking on things to spend individuals' money here, all the way to the point where they've ran this up to 84 billion in wasted spend in a year. Wild to think about, and I think there's a couple things we could talk about for how to maybe prevent this or what we could do. But just initial reaction there is just like this is nuts.
It's totally nuts. I mean, finding that 84 billion this year alone was lost to ad fraud. It's such a staggering number. But yeah, the click farms, the bots, they are the key drivers of the ad fraud, as far as we know, as far as these guys, the Juniper Research Group also found. And, these are definitely malicious actors. It's not a random thing that's happening, which makes me wonder. I'd love to see a report like this broken down by industry, broken down by time of year, you know, uh, having this report being run from 2019 through now. It's such a weird time, right? We're looking at during the COVID years. There was a crazy election. There's a lot of money being spent on ads that are outside of what you and I are doing for clients, right? I think that the ad fraud that's happening for your average businesses out there probably doesn't meet the same percentage. And this is just a hunch. I don't know this. There's no research done, but I would think that the ads that we run for our clients, by all means, there's ad fraud happening to everyone. But when it comes to malicious actors, I think there's definitely a targeting process that's happening. And I could see that being something connected to different causes, political elections, all this COVID madness that the internet experienced over the last few years. So I'd be curious about that. Doesn't take away the fact that ad fraud is real and it's on the rise. And there's definitely a need for anti-fraud measures. I know Google has a sort of built in. There are a lot of companies out there building technology around this as well.
I think that's such a good point about the like by industry and time of year, because I'm also thinking like who is doing this and like what this would benefit, because you have
Yeah,
to like there's some, if you're doing this you got to invest in like a bot farm or pay actual individuals to like sit there and like click on these ads.
yeah.
So like it's got to be like political. It's got to be a lot of like political stuff. I could see a lot of like foreign actors just like getting in the mix just to like mess with American companies, um, or like political opponents trying to like spend another political opponent's ad dollars. So like we're just going to click on all those just to like waste all of their funding to mess with them. I mean, I could also see a large corporation and large brands doing this, but to your point, like your mom and pops and like your smaller SMBs, there's definitely ad fraud, but like I don't know. It makes you wonder like where does it come from? And I feel like we've both kind of like hinted at like foreign or political different institutions
Mhm.
like really getting involved in that. Um
Yeah.
because 84 billion, like that is so much activity to be doing. It's got to be large scale operations.
Yeah. And for these ad fraud actors to pass through the existing filters that are already built into the platforms, there's a way to do that, right? It's not just clicking on the ad over and over from the same IP with a little simple bot.
Yeah.
There, there's a whole scheme set up so that these fraud, like a successful ad fraud actor is getting clicks that aren't getting deducted from um, the person that they're attacking, account. They want them to pay for that fake click, right? So they have all these measures, and that's why I think it's definitely a concerted, intentional effort, which takes me back to that. What industry, what time of the year, what's going on. Again, not to take away from the problem as a whole, but we were talking about this earlier too. That as a business, what can you do about it, right? As a mom and pop shop, or as a medium size e-commerce, whatever kind of business you may be, but you're spending a lot of money on ads. There are some things that you can do to protect your ad spend as much as possible. You have to stay vigilant, right? You can connect to other third party apps, like we were talking about HubSpot, for example.
Yep. I think I think the a couple like important insights from this for sure is like, do not rely on the in-platform data. Like if you're running search
Mm-hmm.
campaigns, if you're running Facebook ads, um, making sure that you're connecting to your CRM. HubSpot's obviously a important or like more popular one as of late here, but making sure that you're not relying on in-platform metrics. Absolutely use those directionally and for your like day-to-day optimizations, but I think when you're like reporting out on something larger for like overall revenue generated or sales or forms submitted, like larger reports and analysis, I think you always got to be connecting that back to your CRM and tying that back. And if there's any large discrepancies, well, there's, a clear red flag that like, hey, we need to dig in here and figure out what's going on. I think that would be step one, is like connect to your CRM if you can. And if you can't, for whatever reason, if resources are tight on the dev side of things, the very least, just do a little cross comparison between ad platform and what we're actually seeing in the CRM itself.
Yeah, 100%.
I think a couple other things that come to mind here. I mean, no affiliation, but like ClickSees, that's a really popular one where if you're running ads, we use it for like a lot of search campaigns and some of our search clients here. I forget if that works on like social platforms or not. But there are a couple like those solutions out there as well, where you could use a third party tool like a ClickSees to help negate some of this ad fraud traffic. Definitely not going to clean everything up, but I've just had so many experiences with clients where they've mentioned about ad fraud, or hey, we get like a lot of like spam, like bot form submissions that like aren't real. Implement ClickSees and actually seeing a difference and an impact from that. So I'd say like do some due diligence and look into some potential tools there. Um, and then I think like there's a couple things on like the actual forms that you could do as well if you're like more of a B2B situation where you're getting a lot of like spam form fills. Recaptcha is a no brainer. Just add that to your forms. But then I also know there's a couple methods like we work with some clients and we implement this method called honeypot method, where essentially it's like you have your form, you got to fill out your form fills to hit submit. The form actually has something where you have to leave a particular form blank. um, the bot can't see that, it fills it out, and then it just gets stuck trying to submit the form. So like there's a couple tricks that you could do on your website there as well on the form side to try and prevent some of that bot traffic. um, but I think probably like ground zero would be connect to your CRM, validate your data, and then see what adjustments you got to make on the back end.
Yeah, and I agree, and I also use honeypot. It's a good little trick. And
Did I describe that right, or did I get
no,
that
you
wrong?
did. No, you
Ah,
did.
nice,
Yeah,
nice,
yeah.
nice.
And captcha, I mean, those are all things that would happen after the click, of course, but it's important to prevent spam for sure. And I think when it comes to ad fraud, of course, it's a concern for advertisers. Um, you know, like everything that we talked about, be mindful, be watchful. There are tools that you can do. I think once your spend level crosses a certain threshold, you become much more
Yes.
vulnerable to that. Spend levels would probably have to be in the tens of thousands of month, I think, for you to really uh, start feeling ad fraud. And there are tools that once you get to those levels that you can use to verify, to cross reference, And there are recourses as well once you find problems to have platforms like Google investigate and refund back anything that they find that was fraudulent. It's a pain in the rear. It does require additional work, but it's part of the marketplace today. You have to do it.
Stay diligent out there, people
Yeah.
doing your paid ads there.
You don't really have an option, right? What's the option? Not advertise, and then what, right? So it's a constantly evolving problem, but there's a constantly evolving solutions around it.
For sure. And if you're an entrepreneur listening and you're like, this could be also a massive opportunity to build a business of like an ad fraud
100%.
prevention type business, like
Yeah. Yeah.
this thing's going to $170 billion in a couple of years. Like there's definitely some money to be made
Oh
there.
yeah.
All right, let's transition over to ChatGPT and some of the updates that were made. I could share my screen because I think they give a couple
Yeah. Cool.
interesting examples here. So essentially, what the main gist of this update here is ChatGPT has announced that they can now see and hear, as opposed to you just have to like use search prompting. So once this loads here, I think there's a couple different examples that they give. What was the one that you were saying? The child stories one.
Yeah, I think it might be right where you are on that screen right there. I think,
This one here.
yeah, yeah, and you don't have to push play right now, but I think I clicked play on that one, and it sounds like a mother basically saying it's bedtime, please tell a story about, and she just comes up with a prompt for the story. Tell us a story about a green dragon that likes to eat mac and cheese, and you got lost or whatever, and it's amazing. It just does a little bit of thinking, and it starts telling a story. You can choose which voice and tone you want it in. And I was mentioning to you before, Trevor, that my kids, I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old. I also have a 20-year-old. This doesn't apply to the 20-year-old. She's in college. But the little guys, they love stories. We're big fans of this podcast called the Stories Podcast. And it just reminded me of it right away, listening to that. So yeah, there's very sweet, mildly creepy as well, having AI tell your kid a bedtime story. But along with that, there's some really interesting user experience and practical applications. I'm always on the go. It's hard for me to really sit down and focus on ChatGPT enough to play with it. But having the ability to talk to it, I can see, just plugging in my earbuds and going for a walk or something, and just having a conversation with it. Right? I'm thinking about something. Let me start asking questions, and it's really amazing. You can have a conversation with it now, an audible, vocal conversation. So there's a whole new world of multitasking with it, where you don't have to sit down and type it all out. The interface just got that much more efficient.
I feel like with every one of these updates and stuff, you can get like a little peek into the future of where things are going. Like we've always, I know there was that movie around that guy falls in love with a robot. I forget
Yeah,
what it was called, but to
her,
your point
right? Is
there,
that what it's called? Or yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
But like I didn't even think about that component of like you could like actually speak to it. So like, hey, ChatGPT, tell my kid a bedtime story. That's easy to kind of understand of how they can do that. But if you have some problem that you're thinking through and you're going on a walk, like you could have a whole in-depth conversation with ChatGPT. I didn't even think about that, but then you could think about that can turn into like a relationship partner, that can turn into a really good friend if you're talking to this person every day or this ChatGPT every day. I didn't even think about that component there, but if you have something on your mind that you're chewing on that you're trying to like work through, if your buddy's tied up at work and you can't just randomly give him a call, ChatGPT 24/7, 365, you can talk to it whenever you want to. That's going to
yeah.
be a really, really interesting one there. I would test that out as opposed to typing and prompting it. I absolutely would test that one out. That's a super interesting use case, and you can kind of see like where that goes.
Yeah, I've played around with an app that was doing that before, and they were they had their own speech recognition software that then basically transcribed what I said and then sent it to ChatGPT, and then
Oh,
they got the
cool.
response back, but it wasn't really that great. So this is all just native, working right through ChatGPT right now, using their own um, you know uh, speech recognition and whatnot. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's a lot of different applications to that. It's it's going to be interesting to see what it does also with the way that we interact with it, because one of the key things that I've learned that's really helped me understand ChatGPT more is that, you know, and I feel like this is not talked about enough, is that there is no it in ChatGPT, right? There's no genie in the bottle. There's no entity, right? It's software. It's taking an input and it's trying to make you happy. It's trying to give you a response that you're happy with, that you say, thank you. That's what I was looking for. And that's all it's doing, right? But the moment you add human voice to it and speech, and now you're actually interacting with it in a society that, we're already struggling with kids making connections and having relationships, not to go into a whole psychological branch of the conversation here, but, it's something that it's mildly concerning. I mean, I'm very excited about the technology. Don't get me wrong. And there's some really cool stuff that they're doing too with accessibility and inclusivity. One of the things that this update mentioned on their own announcement is that they're collaborating with a mobile app for the blind called and low vision community called Be My Eyes, where it's opening up a whole new world for folks with disabilities to interact, engage as well. There's so much that's going to come out of this, right? But yeah,
What
my mind as a parent definitely goes to, I don't want to see my kids talking to ChatGPT.
I
Go make
know.
some friends.
I know. It's just like it's wild because it's like to your point there, like the positive use, but then you could also think of like little kids and like what questions they're going to be asking and what conversations are going to be had there. That is a scary thought there.
Yeah,
Uh, Another use case
yeah,
though that I think would be really interesting. So like we talked about like some of like the speech recognition aspect, but also like the visual recognition aspect. This image here, you could see a world where, and I guess you could do this right now. Essentially, is this is I guess this is like a bike seat that's broken, where maybe you could just like take a picture, put a little circle, and say, "Hey, ChatGPT, how do I fix this? Like, help me fix this." And we were talking before we started. I saw that Meta just announced they released their Ray-Bans with their so you could actually use AI through their Ray-Bans. I don't know if this is like a same if you're using ChatGPT, if you're using a different a different model, but we can kind of see progressing towards like taking pictures of things and saying, "Hey, show me how to fix this. Show me how to do this." Um, I've even seen an example on Twitter about they were doing like a whiteboarding session of some coding of a general app, and they had like some frameworks put together. Literally just took a picture of it, and then ChatGPT digested that and then ran Python as its little plugin and then spit out code for them for whatever that use case would be. So you could see how this iterates into a bunch of different things with the ability for it to see and hear things moving forward. I feel like this is going to be intertwined in so many aspects of our life moving forward there.
100%. Yeah, you can use the visual aspect. We were playing around with this when the announcement came out, and one of the things that we found on Twitter, I'm sorry, X, is a post from. Let me see if I find. I think I'm not sure how to say the user's name. Gaut Galt saying it's over for engineers, and he basically has a yellow pad where he just very quickly scribbled with a ballpoint pen a navigation, home, about, contact us, hello world, put your email here, subscribe, and it's just all hand drawn and said, write me this, build me this landing page, and ChatGPT just got to work on
That's
from a picture
wild.
of a pad, so it's I mean that's already happening, right? But this visual aspect of it is groundbreaking. It's evolving so fast.
Oh, man, that's so wild. It's so cool. It's exciting. It's like a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
That also just reminded me. I saw Steve put a post out on LinkedIn of him speaking in Portuguese there
Oh
of
yeah.
uh of using I forget what the tool was.
Yeah.
Hey,
So hi Gen, I think is what it's called. Let's see.
something
Hi
like that.
Gen.
So
Yeah.
essentially, you could just speak, and then this thing's going to translate whatever you're saying, but in your voice. So it's not going to be using some like robotic sounding. speech. It's going to be your natural voice in a different language. I saw like Lex Friedman put one out of a podcast of him speaking in some different language. So you could think if you're a brand right now that's an international brand,
Mm.
you could easily just create one piece of content and then just have that thing translated in all different languages in a natural sounding voice. And then you just created a ton of different international content from just one piece of content that you created.
Yeah, it won't be long now until you can have a call like this where AI is translating real time, and we can be speaking different languages, but we each hear it in our own native language. This specific tool that Steve was playing around with actually also changed his mouth movements on the
Oh
camera.
my God.
So it looked like he was speaking Portuguese, and it did a really good job. It wasn't a Google Translate version of what he was saying. It was what you'd expect someone to say in the same tone, the same way. I was really impressed by that. Yeah. It did make a funny mix of accents. He sounded both like he's from the city, but also from the country. Being Brazilian, I know accents from there, and it kind of mixed them in a way that it wouldn't be realistic. But I mean, that's very minor. It was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, and think about like if this is the starting point that we're, what happens a couple years down the line? Like it's
I
going to only
mean,
get better there.
yeah, yeah, and just having more, even more connectivity in the world where language is no longer so much of a barrier. Kids can actually talk to kids, across the world in their own languages, and they can understand each other. I mean, there's definitely really
That's so
cool
cool.
application there.
That's so neat. And
Yeah,
side note there, I know one of the things that Mr. Beast has, I don't know if you follow Mr. Beast at all there, um, the famous YouTuber. He,
yeah.
one of the things that I've heard him in interviews talk about how now he's, um, like replicating his content just in different languages. So now it's like Mr.
Mm.
Beast, like Mr. Beast, like Mexico, and you know
Hmm.
he would translate that into Spanish or whatever country. So it's just Mr. Beast country, their native language. And they have a business model where they translate all of their voiceovers, but they will use like natives and a lot of times like famous people, so you can have like a reputable like name or voice that you understand speaking on their
Mm.
behalf, so it sounds legit, and it's somebody that they can like kind of recognize. I'd be curious how like this would impact their business model, and now if this just like completely like disperse this technology to anybody for much cheaper, much quicker production there. So curious to see how this one pans out. But I think a no brainer application for marketing is like you have ad campaigns and video campaigns, you have any type of international stuff, translate it, create one piece of
Yeah.
content, use it multiple times.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be international in the sense that you have international business, right? You think of, I'm in Southern California. We have a huge Hispanic population. We're very close to Mexico. We actually have a lot of folks that live in Mexico and they work in the U.S. and vice versa. Every day they're going through the border. If you're a local business here that you have an audience that is Spanish speaking, how awesome to have a tool like this that you can start engaging with the audience a little bit more. Maybe you just haven't been able to really hook up with a translator that can help you. I think there's still room for that. There's still room to have somebody come in and clean up what AI is doing. But it's always been a difficult thing for companies to do. So yeah, there's an awesome tool for that there.
It's super cool, super exciting. I feel like we just mentioned a ton of different use cases there.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so I think that covered it for the kind of like industry updates that we wanted to speak through. And I think if you're still listening to this podcast, you're definitely a devoted listener and in the weeds of marketing and agency life. Ricardo, he's had, I don't know, 15, 20 years experience in this game, like ups and downs of agency life and how like great it could be at sometimes, how stressful it can be at sometimes, and, a ton of different things on your plate at once. I'd be curious of like, your experience from like back in the days of, things were a little bit more simplified all the way through now. Like, what do you feel like is a consistent theme throughout that time for like project management and just account success in general? You started off saying you're pretty in the weeds of like account management and processes and those types of things. For those listening who are like running an agency or like interested in running an agency, just like could you speak about like a couple important things for like client success and longevity there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. Of course, one day I might write a book there. Let's see, but I will say
Have AI
that
write the book for you.
oh, there you go. um, I'll say that if I had one thing that I would focus on, without getting too much in the weeds, would be just being human with people and focusing on relationships. Um, Skill set is important, experience is important, 100%. Results are important. Obviously, nobody's disputing that. But in my experience, I've had clients that I've worked with and I still work with for over 10 years. And we've gone through ups and downs. We've had challenges. We've had periods that our tactics, our strategy did not work. And, you know, I've learned through experience from my earlier days, times that I would look for ways to spin that a little bit and look for the positive and, just not really talk to my client as they are another human being, just trying to do their job, but as an account. And what I've learned is, you know, it's really about relationships and account management. It's about honesty and being real. You don't have to pretend that you know everything. It's okay for you to tell your client, "I'm sorry, I don't know what that means. Uh, can you help me learn this?" You don't have to be a know-it-all, but I think that's something that comes with the agency world. There's an expectation that as experts, we
Yeah.
should know everything. I mean, I hear acronyms all the time that I've never heard before, and they're like, "Well, I actually don't know what that means," and I've been doing this for a long time. I've never heard that one. Don't be afraid to say that. Sure, there will be a time. There will be, maybe there will be a time that somebody will not like to hear that. They are looking for a know-it-all, and that's fine. But in my experience, uh, I've actually never encountered a time that I was being real with a person. I was showing them that I'm someone who's always learning as well, and that worked negatively for me. I've actually had it the opposite when I am showing up trying to impress. Uh, you know, and I'm not really being myself. I'm trying to be. Uh, I'm almost looking past them as a person. I'm just trying to feed them all this stuff. It actually ends up working against me. So I would focus on that from a client management standpoint. I would focus on relationships. Uh, you know, Sometimes communication gets lost via emails, right? You might get an email from a client that's a little bit heated. They have a lot of questions. Try to look past that and get frustrated yourself. Look at it that they have questions. They're confused, right? Get on a phone call. Don't write back a huge email responding to every single bullet point and change the color of your responses and then get into this back and forth. Just say, hey, let's jump on a quick call. Get back to the human side. So it doesn't always work out. That's okay, right? But that would be the advice that I would put out there on the account management side. It's going to help you if you're organized. It's going to help you if you have processes. I'd love to talk more about the processes that we have in place, the platforms that we use to stay organized. It's important to get back to people on time. It's important to meet your deadlines. Yes. But when it comes to communication, I think it goes a long way to focus on that relationship, learn from your contacts, get to know them as people, ask them questions. It's not just you out there talking their ear off, and then on to the next one. Don't treat them like a number. So I'd leave you with that for today. But yeah, there's a lot more that we can dive into, uh, for sure.
There's gold in there. I feel like you verbalize some things that I've been thinking about. You ever have that happen to you, or you kind of have like an intuition or something, but then somebody actually like verbalizes it, like, oh, that's what I've been thinking. I
Yeah,
think you hit the nail on
for
the head
sure.
there. I feel
Oh,
like
and it's yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I feel like there's a ton to take away from there, but I feel like every time I've asked somebody that question, especially somebody who's like actually like ran an agency and has been in like an executive position, everybody kind of defaults back to something along the lines of like being a good person or like being a normal human who's confident and, doesn't have to know everything, can be totally cool with saying, hey, not sure, I'm gonna dig in and I'll follow up and I'll get that answer for you. I think just having like the human component of these things is like crucial. And we talked a bunch about like AI and like all these new tools and tech stuff. sure, all of that's going to help you, but I don't know. I think there's always going to be that component where like you just want to like connect with somebody and know that they're a good person, they're confident, they know what they're doing, they got good intentions, and they're moving things along.
100%. And we have a gift, we have experience, so it's about helping others, right? I think if you come from that standpoint, we can't help everybody, but sure, but a lot of times we can help them, and then the rest will come, right? You have to have a process, of course. I don't mean to say don't forget it. You got to take notes. You got to be organized, sure, but there won't be a lot of longevity in if there's no relationship, if you don't build trust, right? So, um, yeah, that's it, man. That's the
I th-
secret.
I think there's a bunch to take away from there. I would love to bring you back on and we can talk about some processes. Um, how to scale an agency, some of those processes. I think that would be really interesting, but I feel like this is a really good place to end it there. I think this was an awesome conversation and a good place to call it. So Ricardo, much appreciated for you joining. I think this was awesome. And then yeah, you'll definitely be a long-standing guest on the show to come here.
Right on. Thank you, Trevor. Yeah, it was really fun. Look forward to being back. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks everybody.
Right on.